Yukito is a loser who is so ugly that his dad sacrifices him to a goddess in exchange for booze. However, after getting izakay'd into a horrible fantasy world, he ends up stuck with the same goddess he hates, and he uses her overpowered skill to clap everyone. It all begins when Yukito, who is in a barrel, is taken to the side of a cliff by a mob of gigachads wearing G-strings for the ritual to become the leader of their sect, which involves him being submerged in the sea for 3 days, as instructed by his father, who is the leader of the shady religious sect. Even when he pleads for his life, his father tells him to have faith in their god, Mitama-sama, to save him before sending him to sleep with the fishes. While drowning in the sea, his life flashes before his eyes, and he realizes how much of a miserable loser he is. Right before he goes into the light, he prays to be reborn in a world without gods and religion. Soon after, he wakes up in a forest, only to see a hot chick beside him who starts beating his meat. But when he asks her to hit the right spots, she becomes flustered and crushes his pole. Later on in a nearby village, she apologizes to him, then introduces herself to him as a Lural. Then she tells him that she will service him until he is completely healed, and invites him to have free meals at the tavern she works at. As she leads him to where he can get a job, he makes up his mind to live life to the fullest, and not be a loser like he was in his previous life. However, he is disappointed as he ends up working on a farm. While working, he meets Roy and Clen, who offers Yukito a task which he expects to be a monster hunting mission. However, Yukito is once again disappointed to find out that they are only harvesting grapes. But he remains delusional, hoping that these boring tasks will lead to more adventurous missions. After a month of living with Alural and her sister, Silgurid, at the tavern, Yukito feels frustrated while drinking with his friends at the tavern, because life in that world hasn't turned out as he expected. The following day, after returning from a strange beast attack at the farm, Yukito finds out that magic does not exist in that world, and although he feels disappointed, he is content with his new life as it's not as miserable as his previous life. Then he realizes that he is surrounded by atheists while talking with Alural. The next day, Yukito, alongside Roy and Alural, heads to the imperial capital to get smut books at a bookstore, and on their way, Roy shows him the imperial palace, stating that the emperor taught them everything they need to live. He then tells Yukito to avoid talking with other people as their village is hated. After getting their books, the group heads home. However, Yukito spots a crowd gathered at the center of the capital and joins them to see what's going on, only to find an execution taking place. Upon seeing this, he becomes extremely disgusted, and Alural pulls him away from the crowd, explaining to him that what he witnessed was an end-of-life system put in place by the country. Then, the group heads home. Later at night, as Yukito is about to fall asleep, he is surprised when Alural pops up from under his sheets, asking him to get freaky with her and touching him in his sensitive zones. After this, she apologizes to him and tells him that she was sent to that village because of how she behaves, stating that the village is an isolation camp where outcasts are sent. Then she shows him the mark on her back, which shows people who have been banished from the capital to the village. However, she says how happy she is that Yukito isn't like other people who hate them, but that he relates well with them and lets them touch him in all sorts of places. So Yukito tells her that he understands how they feel, as he was also a lonely loser, and after they talk for some time, he hands her his special necklace. Then he sends her to bed. The following morning, Yukito meets Roy, who informs him that Alural and Sil had been forcefully taken to be executed in the imperial city. To stop this from happening, Yukito and Clen rush to the capital, getting there just in time to stop Alural from meeting her maker. However, Yukito finds out it is too late for Sil. As he defends Alural from the soldiers, Bertrand steps in and uses Yukito's guts as a sheath for his sword, then ends Alural as she rushes towards Yukito. In his last moments, Yukito grabs the necklace he gave to Alural and chants some phrases that summon a lowly character from the skies, who immediately vacuums the soldiers into endless darkness. After this, she revives everyone who was executed and introduces herself to Yukito as Mitama, his god. Later on, the group heads back to the village, where they meet the rest of the villagers who are surprised to see them alive. And afterward, while they celebrate their return at the tavern, Yukito worries that he may have pissed off the imperial capital, thinking of ways to protect the small village. Meanwhile, as Allura tries putting some clothes on Mitama, she asks Mitama how she knows Yukino, as she sat on his face while she was naked when they first met, and Mitama replies that she is Yukito's god, stating that they will be together until death. After hearing this, Allura gets worried as she believes that Yukito won't bone her because he is into little girls. And when Seal tells Mitama that Allura is into Yukito, she comforts her, stating that she is glad that there are people who like Yukito in that world. Later, as Yukito talks with Klen about the capital, they are interrupted by Mitama, and immediately, Roy spots her. His inner culture leads him to ask the little girl to be his bride, disgusting everyone. While they punish Roy, Yukito becomes excited as he finds out from Mitama that she has limitless abilities. However, his climax is short-lived, as he discovers that she is powerless because she has no followers in that world. Later on, as Yukito has a panic attack in the bath, Mitama pops up from between his legs, suggesting that they run away. However, Yukito tells her that he won't just stand by like he did in his previous life, and he makes up his mind to create a religion so Mitama can gain followers to boost her powers. After this, they meet with Roy and easily convince him to become her follower, who dreams of being treated like a masochist by Mitama. Then they form a committee to get more followers. Later on in town, after Mitama failed to give a convincing speech to win over the villagers, he sets up a shrine for Mitama at the center of the town and tries to trick people into believing that Mitama can read their thoughts, using a psychological trick that fake fortune tellers use to read Allura's mind. However, Mitama interrupts his plan, telling Allura that she has been bothered by the extra weight she gained and that Yukito likes little girls with small milk jugs, causing Allura to attempt amputating her melons. By the end of the day, the group fails to gain a single follower after several publicity stunts. And later on, as they gather at the tavern feeling hopeless, Allura rushes into the tavern, holding her pet that is poisoned. Later that night, as the girls are about to give up on the pet, Yukito returns to the tavern holding some herbs to treat the pet. Then he prepares the antidote and feeds it to the pet. However, it doesn't seem to work, as the pet dies. While everyone is sad, Mitama uses the last of her godly powers to bring it back to life, which drains her of animation colors and weakens her. Just then, she discovers that Allura and Seal have become her followers, reviving her. As Mitama is excited to have some of her powers back, Allura asks her to revive the soldiers she had eliminated earlier, stating that they were just doing their jobs. And after she brings back the soldiers outside the tavern, they are surprised to see that the Bertrand has become a hot chick while she takes a cultured pose on the floor while naked, begging that they end her life. The following day, as Bertrand returns to the capital, the guards at the gate stop her and refuse to let her into the city, not believing her when she tells them that she is their commander because she now has melons. Later at night, while Bertrand sits in the woods feeling depressed, Roy shows up, threatening to practice making babies with her. However, Yukito steps in like a knight in shining armor to save her. Then he tells her to come back to the village with him, saying that he needs her help, and she agrees to follow him. The following day, while the villagers work on the farm, a strange beast suddenly shows up, causing everyone present to piss their pants in fear, and Bertrand swoops in to save the day, taking down the beast in one shot. After this, per his twisted plans, Yukito introduces Bertrand to the villagers as their religion's holy knight, telling them that if they join their religion, she will protect their fields from the beasts. After this, he puts his other ploys in motion, offering free food, healing, and new technologies to lure in more followers. Later that day, Yukito meets with Bertrand, and as they talk, she tells him that the Empire's attack force is made of a small unit called Archons, are as strong as Goku. The next day, as Yukito corners Bertrand to a tree, he tells her that she has become a hot, young woman, stating that she should not struggle as he just wants to take a look at what she's packing under her gown. Then she tells him that he can do whatever wants with her body, and Yukito touches all over her body as she makes happy noises, then finally pulls out her longsword to check out what's special about it, as she was able to defeat the huge beast with one stroke. So she demonstrates its power to him by effortlessly cutting through a boulder, and when he asks where he can get a similar one, she tells him that only the Emperor issues the sword to a soldier after they reach a certain rank in the Imperial Army, adding that only the Emperor understands the nature of the sword's power. Later at night in the tavern, as Sil comforts Yukito, who is frustrated as he get enough followers for Mitama, He remembers a conversation he had with his dad about growing followers for their religion, and he later meets up with Clin in the woods to share his idea to develop the village, which he agrees to. A month later, while Bertrand is patrolling the forest in an outfit made of ropes and feathers, she encounters Attar, one of the Imperial Army's archons, who immediately recognizes Bertrand as the former commander in the Imperial Army, and she states that she is surprised that she has switched genders. In response, Bertrand tells Attar that she has become the religion's bitch, and after Attar wipes the floor with Bertrand, she drags her to the village where she is surprised to see modern technology in the village. Meanwhile, back at the village, Yukito meets with Clan and Sil to tell them about his plan to lure in more followers with the technology created using Mitama's power. To begin with, he makes Mitama create machines that cultivate and harvest crops easily. Then he showcases it to the villagers, telling them that only those who follow Mitama will be allowed to use her godly tool, converting a crowd of farmers to Mitama's followers. Then he tells Mitama, who is knocking at death's door, to make more machines for the new followers. Later at the house, while Yukito thinks of what new invention to introduce to the villagers, Allurel walks into the tavern holding a bucket of water, which she pours all over her body to get wet for Yukito. And upon seeing this, Yukito comes up with the idea to provide running water in houses which he calls a divine protection from Mitama. Just then, Sil suddenly shows up, holding swimsuits that she tells them to put on, and after taking them to the pool that Mitama created, Sil shows off Allurel's hot swimsuit to Yukito. But he isn't impressed as he has seen too many adult movies, although the sight of Allurel gives Roy a nosebleed like a fountain. Later at night, Yukito makes Mitama create electricity for the village and tells the girls to convert their tavern into a strip club. The following day at the tavern, as Yukito plans his next move after discovering that everyone in the village is now a follower of Mitama, Roy suddenly rushes in to tell them that Bertrand has been captured by a little girl, so they rush to save her, only to meet her being tortured by Attar. As Mitama steps in to interrupt their BDSM moment, Attar asks who she is, and she replies that she is a god whose duty is to protect her followers. While the two prepare to battle, Yukito checks up on Bertrand, who looks like a beaten-up stripper, and he asks who Attar is. So she tells him that Attar is an archon who is sent to destroy the village. After they're done with some girl talk, Archon fires a powerful energy beam at Mitama, and she is surprised to see that she doesn't take any damage. Then Mitama summons an army of her plant soldiers to attack Attar, but she holds them off for a while, until Mitama eventually overpowers her, sealing her up in a huge face made of glowing plants. However, Mitama's celebration is short-lived, as Attar breaks free from the seal with no clothes on and robot hands floating around her, which she uses to conjure a massive Kamehameha to wipe out the village. As Mitama no longer has enough stamina, she decides to borrow some powers from other gods to counter the massive beam that Attar fired at her. However, the other gods suddenly withdraw their help when they see that Mitama doesn't have enough followers, and she gets knocked out by the blast from the beam. As Yukito rushes to check on Mitama, Allurel and the others show up, and Roy's balls take over his thinking as he asks if he's being rewarded after spotting the naked little girl floating in the skies. Just then, Attar summons a bigger nuke, which she fires at the village, and as the group feel hopeless while they watch the village getting destroyed, Clen suddenly snaps his fingers, releasing everyone from the illusion he put them in. Then she reveals that she is one of the main archons called Loki. After they realize that she infiltrated the village to monitor the villagers, Loki invites Yukito and Mitama to assassinate the emperor of the country alongside herself, surprising everyone. Later on, as they arrive at the palace, they head into the emperor's audience room, where they meet the emperor, who claims that everything that is happening was foretold, and that he knows that Yukito is trying to revive religion and gods. As the emperor keeps on blabbing, Mitama walks up to one of the pillars and destroys it, stating that she was wondering if that was the thing making everybody act like psychos and talk to a skeleton. Suddenly, the appearance of the room changes, revealing thousands of machines, and a skeleton wearing an oxygen mask on the throne, which stuns everyone present except Loki. Then Loki reveals to them that the Emperor died ages ago, and that the Empire is controlled by machines in that room, which the people of that country consider as the Assembly. After hearing this, Yukito realizes that the world was ruled by science. However, he can't figure out what exactly the world is, as the machines are more advanced than anything in his old world. Just then, Mitama tells him that this present world civilization was once wiped out, and some survivors amongst them built a world that would not meet the same fate again, but they erased the belief of gods. After hearing this, Yukito is still in disbelief as his smooth brain did not process any of it. So Mitama further explains to him that she brought him to a future on Earth where they don't believe in gods as he wished for before he died. While Yukito is depressed that even after he came to a world with no gods, he is still a weak loser with no control over his life, Loki asks Mitama to destroy the machines, which would throw the Empire into chaos, stating that she's tired of being under the control of dead people. Then she claims that the village won't have to worry about attacks from the Imperial Army anymore if they go along with her plan. However, before Mitama can jump into action, Yukito suddenly attacks Loki, then pins her to the ground and asks her why she wants to destroy the country. In response, she gives the same reason of being tired of control. However, Yukito presses her to tell him the real reason. So she tells him how she became sick of people being forced to end their lives, revealing how she went undercover into various isolation camps to observe how they lived their lives, eventually meeting Yukito at the village, who seemed strange as he had knowledge that no ordinary person had. And after, he led her to meet Mitama, who is a god that could see through her cover, which gave her an idea to conduct an experiment in another village, earning followers of her own, and gave her powers that she could never use before. After she saw this, she realized that the Archons were built to be like gods. Afterward, she states her plan to become real gods like Mitama and to change the world into what it used to be. Then she once again asks Yukito to destroy the machines. In response, Yukito agrees with her, stating that a world with free will isn't so bad. Then he orders Mitama to destroy the palace, and after this, Loki asks him what his plans are. So he tells her that he still wants to make Mitama the only god like he planned before, stating that other fake gods can't win against Mitama. Later that night at the tavern, while the villagers celebrate the destruction of the Empire, Yukito worries as their situation seems worse. And when he asks Loki why she's still with them, she tells him that she just wants to have one last drink with her friends before leaving. As they talk, Roy walks up to Loki to grab her melons, and he is surprised when Loki places his hands on her chest while making happy noises. But he is unaware that he is under her illusion, and that he is actually pressing the chest of a muscular man. After failing to get a reaction from Yukito by mocking him, Loki decides to head out to gather more followers, stating that Yukito can do what he wants with Artar. However, as she walks out on them, Yukito tells her that he will do whatever it takes to protect the village, no matter what she plans on doing. After this, Bertrand meets Loki as she is on her way out of the village, and decides to follow her to the Imperial City, stating that she is obliged as a knight of the Empire to protect its citizens from Loki. Later on, while everyone returns home, Yukito decides to comfort Artar, promising to help her defeat the other Archons so she can rebuild the assembly. And when she asks why he wants to help her, he tells her that the other Archons are his enemies too, stating that he just can't resist when a naked little girl like her is crying. Then he presses her face against his body. The following day, Yukito introduces Artar as a new god of their religion to the villagers, splitting the followers between Mitama and Artar, and this restores Artar's power. After some days, while Yukito holds a meeting with the group to track their progress at the tavern, he suggests that they gather more information on other Archons, and that they find Bertrand, who disappeared. Syl then informs him that a woman named Dakini claims to God, gaining 10,000 followers, and Yukito soon figures out that she is an Archon, asking Artar if she has any details about her. So Artar tells him that she doesn't know anything about her, but she heard that Dakini's powers are related to adult workouts. After this, Yukito, alongside Mitama, Roy, and Alural, heads to the village where Dakini stays to investigate her sect, and on arrival, Yukito immediately gets Love Hotel vibes just from looking at the gates. Just then, two Glock queens, who are bragging about how many people they've boned, walk out of the gate, and as Yukito asks them for directions to where they can sign up for the religion, Richie, a high-ranking Glock queen, shows up, stating that she'll take them to meet their leader. As they arrive at the entrance of the ceremony room to meet with Dakini, Richie tells them that they're only permitted to enter as a pair of a man and a woman, so Yukito and Alural head in. while Roy and Mitama are taken to another room. While waiting to meet with Dakini, Yukito warns Allura not to let her guard down, as the deity may be a very scary person. However, they are surprised to meet a very jovial bimbo, introducing herself as Daikini, and after Yukito asks to be accepted into her religious group, she simply accepts, taking a picture of them with the device she had in her hand before exiting the room. Suddenly, Yukito starts feeling extremely turned on and sees Allura starts undressing, telling him to put a baby in her. However, before anything can happen, he decides to keep his 18-year virginity streak and tries to bring her back to her senses. Just then, Roy flies through the wall of the room with his nuts hanging out, and Mitama angrily walks in, reporting to Yukito that Roy tried to defile her. Meanwhile, Daikini orders Richie to check on them, and when she walks into the room, she sees Mitama fixing the wall with her powers. When Yukito tells her not to snitch about what she saw, she starts fantasizing about him forcefully having his way with her to shut her up, and then she climaxes from this. After they witness such a weird scene, Richie asks why they were not affected by Daikini's power. So Yukito explains that he is a ballless monk, and that Mitama is God. Then they are surprised when Richie suddenly asks for their help to destroy Daikini's religion. Later on, Richie tells them that the isolation camp where she was living got overrun by Daikini's sect, also explaining that she wasn't really a cultured freak like the rest of the followers, but her vast knowledge about adult content made the other followers assume that she was an expert at that kind of stuff, so they appointed her as their chief officer. After hearing her reasons to destroy the sect, Yukito agrees to help her out, and while Richie and Allura become adult-content besties, Mitama notices that her follower count is reducing by a lot. Later on, as Richie introduces the group to the other members of Daikini's faction, they immediately surround them to clap their cheeks. However, Richie steps in, stating that their rice cakes are hers, and orders them to perform their daily adult workout sessions somewhere else. After this, Richie asks Yukito what his plan is, and he prepares a plan for her to lead a separate faction to split the sect's followers, keeping in mind that Daikini is always on the move. After a while, Yukito's plan seems to be working as Richie's faction grows larger daily, and Daikini, who heard of what they were up to, quickly rushes back the branch, arresting Richie and the group as she suspects that they're trying to overthrow her. Later on, Daikini puts them on trial in front of her followers and asks Richie why she was organizing her followers without her permission, who suddenly bursts into tears, apologizing for not being devoted enough to Daikini, then asks her to dish out her most severe punishment to her like a martyr. After seeing this, some of her followers begin to protest against Daikini, asking her to show mercy on them, and she realizes that it's all part of Yukito's plan, so she adjourns the trial. Afterward, they are thrown in jail by Roy, who is now a henchman for Daikini, and as Yukito tries to talk him back into sanity, he tells him his love for wanking won't waver, as it's the path Daikini has set him on, after which he tries walking off like a cool villain. Later on, as Yukito thinks of a plan to escape, they are suddenly approached by a masked Gigachad, who Richie calls a purger, that could kill them if Daikini orders it, and as the Gigachan breaks into their cell, everyone starts pissing their pants. Just then, Artar blasts through the prison walls alongside Syl to save them, and Mitama is surprised to see that Artar's follower count has increased by a lot. As Artar holds back the purgers, the rest of the group head out of the prison, and Yukito explains to Mitama that all of her followers were transferred to Artar because she left the village, which was part of his plan to first dilute Daikini's power by dividing her members, then strengthening Artar so he can forcefully take over Daikini's sect. Soon after, they are intercepted by Daikini, who spots Richie holding a smut book that belonged to someone she loved called Toka, who was killed because of the Empire's twisted rules, and while she is distracted by this, Artar suddenly blasts her with her energy beam, while Yukito hands Mitama to Richie, telling her to initiate Phase 2 of the plan. After Richie runs off with Mitama, Artar attempts to capture Daikini, stating that she'll pay for what she did to the Empire, which pisses off Daikini, and she suddenly goes into beast mode, transforming into her ultimate nude form. Daikini then blasts them with her culture ray, causing Artar and the others to get turned on. And before they can have a foursome with Yukito, Mitama shows up to save them as she has gained some power from the followers Richie stole from Daikini. However, Daikini doesn't seem to be bothered by losing a few followers and prepares to launch another attack on them. But she is surprised as she develops performance anxiety. Mitama then frees everyone from her spell, explaining to her that she knew the real god called Daikini, bluffing that the real Daikini is a lower-ranked god who kissed the ground and submitted to her after speaking with her, when in reality, she had to lick the real Daikini's feet to convince her to take away Daikini's power. Seeing that she is at a disadvantage, Daikini tries to escape, but she is held back by Roy, who doesn't miss the chance to hold a naked woman for the first time in his life, and Artar blasts her with her energy beam. As Daikini lays on the floor with her huge melons hanging out, she vows that she will return the world, which she tainted, to its original state. And just then, Richie approaches her, then tells her that Toka was her mother. Upon hearing this, Daikini recalls a memory of talking with Toka, who was an anomaly that loved Iro stuff during a period when Daikini took away the human's libido, and that Toka told her that she would love to have a baby the natural way, so the child can grow up to be friends with her. Daikini then starts apologizing to Richie, admitting that she f***ed up the world, and tells her that she loves her, calling her Toka. Later on, after capturing Daikini, Yukito asks her to tell her followers to serve Mitama, which she refuses to do, so they lock her up in prison, threatening to end her if she doesn't comply with their request. After her previous visit to the cell, Richie returns to meet with Daikini, holding Yukito in chains, and at the end of their X-rated play to persuade her, she agrees to entrust her followers to Richie, stating that they are connected by an erotic bond that spans generations. The following day, on their way back to the village, while the group is happy that Mitama successfully gained Daikini's followers, they are suddenly attacked by an army of beasts, which they successfully escape from. However, when they arrive at the village, they see that it has been destroyed by the beasts. However, Mitama is able to rebuild the whole village in an instant. Later that night, as the villagers celebrate at the tavern, news that Roy is in danger reaches the group and they rush to save him, only to meet the simp with a girl as they are chased by a monster. After they defeat the beast, Roy attempts to touch the girl's special parts, but she knocks him out, and when Artar walks up to her to check on her, she suddenly sticks her tongue down Artar's throat and sucks the daylight out of her. After this, she introduces herself as Gaia, one of the main archons who has the ability to control strange beasts, and immediately, Yukito ambushes her, figuring out that she sent the beasts to destroy the village. However, before he can attack her, she tells him that it was an accident. Later on, while at the tavern, Gaia explains to them that she doesn't have enough followers to control the strange beasts, and when Yukito asks why she showed up, she says that she wants to stop Loki, who seems to be working on something dangerous at the Imperial capital. The following day, as the group heads for the Imperial capital, they are surprised to see a huge wall surrounding the city that shoots down anything that moves close to it. Soon after, Bertrand meets them at the wall with Loki suddenly appearing shortly after, asking why Yukito is accompanied by a team of useless gods, and then Loki reveals that she has gained more than 1 million followers, causing Mitama to tremble like there is an earthquake. However, Yukito says that he is surprised that she is boasting about such small numbers, and he orders the group to head home. Then he tells Loki that if she had attacked them, she would have become history, and leaves with the group. After they get back to the village, the group realizes that Yukito was bluffing earlier, and they are glad that they retrieved Bertrand. When Bertrand tells them about the situation in the city, Yukito figures out that Loki is acting as the emperor by using her illusion on the entire capital. And while the rest of the group panics, Yukito calms them down, stating that he can handle the psychological war. Then he announces that he'll become a producer for the next-gen song Princess. After making his announcement, Yukito realizes that the girls don't know what music means, as the emperor had erased all traces of it. So he makes up his mind to bring back music to the world, and then he sets up rehearsals for the girls. After some days, Yukito organizes a night concert for Mitama's followers, and his plan to bring music back seems to go smoothly. As he observes the concert with Mitama from a distance, she suddenly feels power overflowing in her, but her follower count didn't change. So Yukito explains to her that the concert had strengthened the unity of her followers, which increased her power. However, when Mitama suggests launching an attack on Loki, Yukito stops her, stating that there's someone they need to crush before fighting Loki. Meanwhile, as Bertrand is on the mission that Yukito assigned to her, she sees that Gaia goes around trying various schemes to get little kids to follow her home. And finally, she tails her to a house in the middle of the forest, where she meets a bunch of kids that Gaia had adopted as her family. Later at night, after Bertrand reports her findings to Yukito at the tavern, he figures out that Gaia's adopted kids is her religious group, explaining that the smallest form of religion is a family. And then he suggests that they crush her family by replacing Gaia as the head of the family. The following day, while waiting at the outskirts of the village to meet with Dakini, Yukito is approached by Bertrand, who is under Dakini's spell, and she suddenly restrains him, then tears his clothes off so she can suck him off. But before she can develop plot with him, Richie forces Dakini to release Bertrand from her spell. After Dakini has a short conversation with Yukino, she asks him why he arranged the meeting with her, and he asks them for a favor. Later on, while at the tavern, he explains to them that he wants Dakini to steal Gaia's family from her, to prevent her from exploiting the children, bringing up her past to manipulate her, and Dakini finally agrees to help him. After some days, as Yukito and Mitama stall Gaia with endless rehearsals to keep her away from the children, Dakini makes her move, infiltrating Gaia's family, and begins to befriend the younger children. However, some of the older kids find out what Dakini is doing and challenge her, telling the other kids not to interact with outsiders. As she tries to persuade them, one of the kids gets triggered and suddenly summons wild beasts to attack her. After being chased through the forest for a while, Dakini and the other kids meet Yukito and the group, while Artar defeats the monsters. Soon after, the ground begins to quake, and Gaia suddenly shows up. However, when Yukito tells her to give up on her plan to exploit the kids, she uses her summoning jutsu, causing massive worms, called Typhon, to emerge from the ground. Meanwhile, Kayan and Kai run towards Gaia, asking what the beast is, and they are devastated when she turns the ground to quicksand, which drowns the kids. When Artar attacks the Typhon, it seems to take 0 damage, and as it fires its death rays at them, Mitama wards off the attacks, which drains her strength. Then, the beast charges straight at them. However, the group is saved as Aluril and Sil drive their truck into the beast. During their Fast and Furious X escape scene, the complete form of the beast appears right in their front, and Yukito falls off the truck while trying to save the kids. Immediately, the beast stabs him in the gut, then pulls him up into its mouth, while Mitama grabs him, and the two become monster snacks while the others escape. Later on, Yukito wakes up to find himself tied up naked in a poorly lit room, and then Gaia walks in with her huge melons, transformed into her true form, after she tells him that they are in the belly of the Typhon, stating that she tried ending him many times, but Mitama kept infinitely reviving him. She walks up to him to develop plot, and Yukito realizes that they are headed for the capital city. Later on, Gaia explains to Yukito that Archons are a type of biological half-human weapons who lost their memories of their lives as humans when they were created. Then she tells him about her past life in a community led by her mother, who maltreated her, and how she ended up destroying her mother, along with the community before she was converted into an Archon by the Empire. She then says that Yukito acts just like her mother, who decides people to exploit them like he is doing to Mitama's followers. And when he tries denying what she said, she forces him to realize how much of a lying bastard he has been towards his group. However, as he is about to give up, he hears Aluril's voice, and they notice that the group has set up a concert to restore Mitama's powers. As they start the concert, each of the gods feel an increase in their power levels, and Artar is the first to attack the Typhon, while Dakini joins the attack soon after. Although the Typhon initially seems to take some damage from their attacks, it suddenly fires attacks at the arena where Mitama's followers are. However, Aluril encourages them to keep the concert going. Meanwhile, inside the belly of the Typhon, Yukito tricks Mitama into setting them free. Then he goes after Gaia. However, she is able to hold her ground in close combat with him. Later on, as things seem to become worse, the group initiates Phase 2 of their plan, and Artar announces to the crowd that she's retiring from her position of a god, telling her followers to direct their devotion towards Mitama. When the crowd declines her request, Richie tells them that Artar would work with the Dakini sect after she steps down to service her past followers, and immediately her followers begin to direct their support towards Mitama. As she has gained more power, Mitama summons a massive plant soldier to hold back the Typhon, while Yukito fights Gaia. And even when he takes serious damage, He keeps on attacking her as Mitama keeps healing him. While Gaia directs all her attention to Yukito, Mitama turns her into a human kebab and ends her, blowing the Typhon in pieces. Later on, the group meets Yukito and Mitama, and they are glad that he is alive. Meanwhile, the kids meet Gaia, who is severely injured, and she tells them to end her. However, before Kai is able to add a new hole to her body, Kian stops him and asks Gaia why she tried to make a family, who replies that it's probably because she wanted to have something, as she didn't have anything. After hearing this, Kai praises Gaia for the care she showed her and the other kids, telling her that they'll start over again to make a real family. After this, while the village celebrates their victory, Yukito informs Gaia that they decided to take her and the kids in their custody, but Kai will be supervising her. Just then, Yukito notices that Mitama's follower count is much higher than it should be. Then Loki suddenly appears, telling Yukito that she helped them defeat the Typhon by using her power to transfer part of her followers to Mitama, and he tells her that she shouldn't feel too comfortable on her high horse, threatening to take her down once his preparations are complete, before she disappears. Later on, Sil and Aluril meet Yukito by the river, and he goes through memory lane with them, reminiscing about their experiences so far. Soon after, they are joined by the rest of the group, then they take him back to the tavern to continue their celebrations. Do you think Yukito will eventually defeat Loki? Let us know if you want part 2 by commenting Mommy Aluril in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.